What's up, bookworms? It's week 15 of the 52-week short story writing challenge. This week was a very challenging week for me as far as writing goes, but we're gonna get into all of that. So let's take a look at the data this week, shall we? What was this week's short story title? I'm glad you asked. Let's head over to the Writer with a Cause website to Intragalactic Pen Pals. That's right, intragalactic, not intergalactic. Intra. Date published. Genre is fiction, as per usual, / sci-fi / futuristic. Word count, 889 words. Page count, 5. What the heck happened this week? How many days did I spend on this story? Well, see, that's a tricky question because technically I spent 1 day on this particular story, but in reality I spent all week trying to write this story. I just had 2 false starts is all. So in a way, I was writing it, I just didn't know I was writing this particular story yet. Let's see if we can get all that down. How many total writing sessions did it take? 2 incomplete writing sessions where I started to write 2 completely different stories than the final product that we have, and then 1 5-hour writing session. What time of the day did I write best? The pattern I'm falling into is definitely the end of the day, and I just learned something that's blowing my mind a little bit. Listen to this. How long did it take from idea to finished draft? 5 hours and 20 minutes. Did I outline first or discover the story while drafting? I certainly discovered this story while drafting. Here's my short story notebook where I start my first drafts. You can see here, I started this new thing this week where I put these little corners on my notes that aren't going to be in the final story, but are just general ideas. Like here, I'm just writing a general concept because I know I'm going to be writing about this same world next week, and it was helpful while I was writing. People are living so long, it's physically impossible to self-store all your memories in your brain. So this isn't something that I overtly say in my actual short story, but it's something that I know up here, and I may reveal later on. And then let's see another example. Oh, the idea of them being space-time pen pals. And then, regular writing, draft, regular writing. There's a bunch more notes. So like 4 pages of draft 1 with background details. That's right. Next. Where did I get stuck? All the time, every single moment of every single day for the last 6 days. In all sincerity, when I think about it, it was really the ideation phase that was really tripping me up this week because I had 3 unique ideas, but I overestimated my ability to complete the first one, which would have involved me learning a whole other skill set of knowing the ins and outs of microcomputers, which I still want to learn and will still write about, but not in 1 week. I mean, I have to be realistic with myself, and I just wasn't. And then I started writing another story, and then partway through writing it, it just didn't feel right anymore. So then we're here. So I think the ideation phase. What part came the easiest? Definitely the little corner notes that I showed you, which is my version of outlining. What part took the longest? The first draft. Once I had the first draft written and typed out what I had, I could really see more clearly what I had in front of me and where it made sense to expand points and delve deeper into certain parts of the short story. For example, this paragraph wasn't in my first draft. It's something that I imagined after typing this out. So I'd already been working with this idea like 3 or 4 times, like rereading it, between writing it, reading it, rereading it, typing it, and reading it again like 4 or 5 times. and then this just kind of flowed out naturally. Did I finish ahead of schedule or under pressure? Freddie Mercury puts it best. All right, section two. Emotional motivation check. How excited was I to write this story at the beginning? I was feeling excited to write my initial idea having to do with microcomputers, and I'm still excited to write that. But then I got a little disappointed when I realized that it was impossible to write in 1 week with a very limited knowledge base of microcomputers, despite spending like 5 hours studying about them, which really isn't a long time in the scheme of understanding something. So, but I know this about myself. I know I do this where I set really high expectations, and then sometimes you need more time to meet them. It's not that you can't meet them, it's just you need more time. You can't meet them in the time period allotted. So that's what we ran into this week. How excited was I by the end? I'm looking forward to writing the response letter. Something I'm learning is that I really enjoy chronicled short stories, which is how Ray Bradbury wrote the Martian Chronicles. Initially, they were a series of short stories, and he said he always wanted to write something like Winesburg, Ohio by Sherwood Anderson, a collection of individual stories that come together in one world and form a cohesive moral message. And he unknowingly was doing that himself, and when he took all of his short stories to the editor, they said, "Hey, can you make it one big book?" And he said, "Okay, I can do that." And so then he outlined it all together, and shazam! So I'm learning that I'm more inclined to write in a serialized or chronicalized way, because it's hard. Sometimes it's hard to give up a story after 1 week, but I have been doing that. I have a good mix, I think, so far of Dear Alice, letters, and then now this, and perhaps that one short story I wrote about mechanoids. At what point did motivation drop? I was feeling defeated Wednesday and Thursday. What moment made me want to keep going? I started getting more energy from this story to, keep writing it when I started thinking of the different visuals that go with the story. So these visuals, pamphlet from the future, once I could see those in my mind, it made the world feel more real, and I was excited to learn more about it and write more about it. What kind of resistance showed up? Fear, perfectionism, fatigue, confusion. This week I dealt with a lot of perfectionism issues, which I haven't run into really during this project. Maybe I have nothing to be a perfectionist about. Moving on. Did I enjoy the writing process this week? Why or why not? All in all, totally. Writing is a joyful thing for me, and, if I'm not enjoying it, what am I doing? And by joyful, I don't mean everything went smoothly and perfectly, because obviously that's not what happened this week. But personally, I enjoy when it's more difficult than usual, because then I learn something in the end. What emotion dominated the writing experience? Time crunch was real. What would I do differently if I had 1 more week? I'd write more. Section 3, craft reflection. What did I learn? What part of the story worked best? Well, in order to answer this, we've got to go to the source itself. I think the second paragraph works the best. It gives a lot of good context to the narrator's world. What part feels the weakest? I could argue that the first sentence jumps into the story too abruptly. I enjoy walking to the coffee shop half a mile from my home. Although technically I greet you with a personal anecdote, I could have spent more time smoothing that out, and I don't know what I would have done differently, but that's something I'm willing to revisit this week. Did the ending satisfy the promise of the opening? Yeah, because we see this scrap of paper sharing what the date is way in the future, 10,000 years. Was the central conflict clear? I think so. The fact that space-time is the big barrier between these two characters. We have one character written here, and we don't really know anything much about the second character other than that they're from the 21st century. So that's a big point of friction. All time travel is also space travel. Thank you, Neil deGrasse Tyson and Chuck Nice. Did the characters surprise me? Yes, because when I first started writing out the first draft, I didn't know that it was a letter I was writing. I thought it was just like a diary entry or a first-person narrative from this future dude way in the future. But then when I got towards the end of the first page here, I realized right around here that he was writing a letter. What do you know? So the fact that there was a whole character that I wasn't expecting to write about this week did surprise me. Where did the prose feel alive? I liked it when the narrator asks some innocent questions in the third paragraph in particular. Anyway, once I've placed my order, I often read a couple pages of my book that day, or elect to listen to music through my transmitter, or better yet, eavesdrop on the cafe's patrons. People watching, right? I like that idea of him needing that confirmation. I got this human quirk right? Like, it's called people watching, and you do that too? So I enjoyed that. Where did the prose feel flat or forced? I think in the first paragraph I was trying to set the scene maybe a little too forcefully. I'm introducing a lot of kind of dense ideas between the hippocampus, neocortex, and amygdala, to then hoping the reader makes the connection. What sentence or paragraph am I proudest of? Towards the end, I apologize, my prose is untethered from any intentional thesis. I've rehearsed this letter in my mind and on an incalculable amount of loose leaf, yet it seems no amount of preparation could have readied me for the jumbled mass of feelings I'm experiencing now, writing to you, a resident of the 21st century. If the reader's been at all confused about the setting, the time and place of this story, that paragraph clears up a lot. What recurring weakness appeared again this week? The actual writing process. What craft technique do I want to steal from something I read this week? I actually did do this in Kurt Vonnegut's Breakfast of Champions. That's really what inspired me to include some graphics. Part 4. Behavior patterns, the self-study layer. What triggered procrastination this week? Perfectionism and lower confidence in my writing. What conditions led to my best writing? Environmental factors. Well rested is a big deal. Big deal for clarity of thought. What caused momentum? Having an idea I felt solid, sturdy, confident in. What caused avoidance? Multiple ideas that required much longer timelines and wanting to write all of them all at once. Did deadlines help or hurt? Deadlines always help. What type of story ideas make me move faster? Ones based in the future. That's what I'm learning. Do I write better from prompts or personal obsessions? No prompts yet. What habits consistently led to stronger drafts? Daily writing. Daily journaling. And this is something that Kurt Vonnegut actually talks about in one of his lectures or speaking events that you can find on YouTube, also linked below, where he encourages young writers to keep a daily journal because that keeps you writing and it gets all the extra stuff out of your brain so that then when you sit down to write whatever story you want to write, it's not clouded with so much of your everyday life. It doesn't seep into the story. Part 5. Decision making. Why did I choose this story idea over others I considered the easiest to write? Where did I make major structural decisions? The images, for sure. The drawings. What did I cut and why? I actually cut a good amount from the first draft. This week I really worked on being succinct in what I'm trying to say, and I wanted to try to avoid repeating myself as much as possible. Oh, I cut this part about where the narrator kind of gets a little mean. I realized it was too mean for this character. Part where he says I use younger here as a euphemism for naive. So then it says, never did I imagine that your people would be relegated to the past so absolutely. This is what I took out. I cannot imagine how challenging it must be for you to read a letter like this, tantalized with future prosperity you will never be privy to. Just felt too cruel. I was trying to make him sound empathetic, but I felt like it just came across a little too cruel for the character than I wanted. Maybe he'll say it later, like if they get in a fight or something, but it didn't feel right for the first letter. What did I deliberately avoid writing? I didn't want to get too lost in the coffee shop scene in, describing all the different ins and outs of that particular shop, though maybe I should have, but it didn't feel like it should be the main focus of the story, and I didn't want it to get carried away right in the beginning with that. Did I choose the safe idea or the risky one? I think this was down the middle idea. Like, there were certainly things that I had to double check and learn a little bit about, but all the topics were things that I've thought about before in some regard, and maybe just needed some refreshers on or more context to. What instinct did I trust most? The instinct I always trust most is when to end a story. Which single decision improved the story most? My outlining approach of the brackets. Later this week, I'm gonna post a video dedicated to just this idea of what I'm calling stream of thought outlining. So if you're curious about that, tune in later this week. Moving on to section 6, experiment for next week. What is one thing I want to change next week? Once again, and I believe this was last week's goal too, when I actually start writing, what process variable should I test? Well, something that helped me when I was feeling the time crunch on Saturday and Sunday to get this week's short story done was actually some yoga and meditation, just some mindful deep breathing and separation from my technology. It definitely cleared my mind, and that's something that J.D. Salinger really embraced when he was a bit older in writing, and it's something that I want to try to do every day this week before sitting down to write. What craft skill do I want to focus on? Knowing what I'm going to be writing about. I'm going to be writing the response letter. I want to focus on the character development and make sure that these characters make sense. So I'm going to be reading some more Eudora Welty stories because I think she does a great job at character development. What would make next week's writing easier? Being able to follow through on the idea. What should I deliberately repeat from this week? Stay agile. I pivoted when I needed to pivot. Even though I had 2 false starts, I didn't give up. I just kept on thinking and reworking it, and then finally landed on something that I was really interested in and was a reasonable subject to write about in the amount of time I had. And finally, what should I stop doing? Not believing in myself. Reader response. Track this even when empty, which we know it will be. Did anyone comment on or respond to this week's story? Let's see. Let's check YouTube. No responses yet, but that's okay. And I don't believe there were any responses on the website. No. 0. That's okay. We're just logging the data for what it is. And we're only on week 15. We've got 52. It's all groovy. Weekly meta insights. What predicts whether I enjoy writing the story? I think the health of the topic. What predicts whether I finish early versus late? Quality of the idea. What process produces my strongest endings? These are all first drafts, and at the end of these 52 weeks, I'm gonna want to revisit all of these short stories with a fresh perspective. 52 weeks. What consistently leads to avoidance? I think part of what's happening is I've been finishing my stories on Sunday, and then Monday comes and I feel all accomplished, like, oh, I just finished this big project, and now I can afford to take a little break. But a week goes by like that, and I overestimate the amount of time I have. What kinds of ideas sustain momentum for 7 days? This is kind of a vague word, but it's the one that comes to mind. I think interesting ideas, well-grounded ones, achievable. Overall satisfaction rating this week. Well, as long as I'm posting the stories by Sunday, I think that is an automatic at least 1 star, at least 2 stars. I did find the story itself compelling, so about 3 stars for compelling. I'll give myself points for those sentences I liked. I really like the title. I'll give myself a 6 a bonus point, so 6 points. Alright, as usual, if you are curious to read this week's short story, you can check it out at thewriterwithacause.com, which you can view right on my YouTube channel. Website's linked right there at the top. If you'd like to support me in my writing, you can join the Patreon or buy me a coffee down in the description below. I post a new short story every Sunday and post this companion video. I super appreciate you watching and hope you have a wonderful, beautiful, magical, awesome, totally cool, good vibrations rest of your day and week. And yeah, man.